Well, I never thought that I would talk about Enlightened Next or evolutionary enlightenment ever again. And so I certainly was not planning on returning to Fox Hollow. It wasn't so much fear or worry that I would suddenly relive everything, but it was more a sense of weirdness. Like, it was just weird to go back.
Andrew Cohen calls his teaching evolutionary enlightenment. This new understanding of spiritual awakening redefines the pre-modern notion of enlightenment for the modern world.
It was really powerful. I started to have powerful spiritual experiences, like the kind of mind-blowing textbook stuff. And it was like, this is what I'd been looking for my whole life.
In evolutionary enlightenment, the goal is not to get out of the universe. The goal is not to escape from the universe. The goal is to get into the process.
I read one of his books. It had this huge impact on me. It kind of hit me in this way that sort of started to burn and caught fire inside.
And I just came up to Andrew after his talk and told him that when I looked into his eyes, I was looking into eternity. There was just like this power that I felt emanating from him.
We are lost in this small-minded, self-centered hell life experience in which our experience of what it means to be alive is so partial and so small and so minimal, it's almost impossible to imagine how small it is.
I first got involved in Enlightened Next in 2005. I was 23 at the time. I had just done a workshop with a guy named Don Beck who knows Andrew. And I had actually seen ads of Andrew's retreats where he was sitting up literally on a pedestal, surrounded by 100 or 200 people all looking up at him. And again, all of that just screamed cult to me. And I remember I made a pact to myself silently that I would never become a student of Andrew Cohen's because it just seemed like a pathetic life to spend all of your waking hours following another person.
People who are awake to what I call the evolutionary impulse are alive with the thrill of existence.
An hour and a half after Andrew's talk, I basically had a kind of blowout, what you would typically call a mystical experience, and Andrew was the only person I could attribute it to.
Sam would be a perfect recruit for this kind of group. Intelligent, hardworking, attractive preferably. Now, why would Sam drop everything and follow? Nobody ever said, hey, where do I find a cult in the Yellow Pages? How can I join?
We had kind of a, I guess you could call it kind of a Romeo and Juliet cult version story, how we met. Because we both entered the community in other relationships. We both got involved because her ex-husband and my ex-wife both got interested, and we sort of followed them in. And then we each of our partners left. They left the community. They were kind of forced out. Yeah. And so we had to choose between that relationship and this whole thing.
The whole buzz was that there was this American called Andrew Cohen that was in India and had apparently become enlightened. I just figured, how could somebody from New York get enlightened? And for some reason I thought I shouldn't judge, I should actually go check him out. And at that time Andrew wore jeans and a t-shirt. We'd just sit and meditate for hours. And also I felt like I started to understand the meaning of life in a cosmic sense. I remember the most powerful experience being that I saw that the language of the cosmos was one language, and it was the language of love.
Is everybody familiar with the phrase, the burden of existence? Do you know what it means? Woe is me.
And it was so powerful, that sort of recognition, that I did basically pledge allegiance to Andrew, really, in the end.
Enlightened Next was founded by spiritual teacher Andrew Cohen in 1988. Its core teaching of evolutionary enlightenment was designed to allow people to experience spiritual enlightenment while also embracing a more modern lifestyle. In 1996, we moved to a property called Fox Hollow, located in the Berkshire mountain range of western Massachusetts. At its peak, Enlighten Next had close to 1,000 followers, with communities and centers around the world.
Experts in this field are careful about what we call cults because it's a very subjective term. One man's cult is another man's religion. So I prefer to speak about groups in which there's a high degree of control, manipulation, coercion, exploitation, and abuse. And Enlighten Next is notorious for those characteristics.
You know, people think of the Hell's Gate cult, the people who drank the Kool-Aid and all committed suicide, or they think of the people in Jonestown, the Waco. Some cults match that description, but not all of them. And the one we were in was full of really interesting, really fired up, really intelligent, really headstrong people.
In many ways, Enlighten Next embraced the modern world. I had my own company that I was running with a couple of people here. We're basically providing marketing services to corporations and startups. But it was funny because we would meditate for 2 hours. I would make my breakfast. Our office was at the apartment buildings right here. And I'd be making phone calls to Fortune 500 companies trying to close business, knowing that in 45 minutes I would have a meeting about a spiritual crisis that I was in. This very strange mixture of business by day and super intensive spiritual development by night and morning. When you get to about, 20 miles outside the property, you start to feel yourself overcome by some type of hypnotic state, and your whole perspective changes. This was the house that I lived in. It was called Fullness. We used to call it the celibate icebox because it got freezing in that room, and the three of us who lived in there were all celibate. I chose to be celibate, but it was considered mandatory. One would either be celibate or in a committed relationship. So, when I first moved here, this is where we would do all of our meditation. This was called the Blue Room. So I've spent hundreds, if not thousands of hours of meditation just in this room. Everybody actually had a photo of Andrew in their room. And the idea was that you're keeping the guru front and center, which means that you're keeping God front and center at all times. And people would often prostrate to a picture of Andrew because it means that they're being humble and they're prostrating in the face of God. So you'd say, to be free is to know nothing, and then you go like that. You'd have a pad underneath you. And you say, to be free is to be no one. To be free is to have nothing. Every morning, people would maybe do 400 of those, and then some people over a period of time would actually do 100,000 of those.
Well, it began when I met my own spiritual teacher in India in 1986. I had a spiritual realization. And it was as a result of that miracle, I started teaching and sharing what he had conveyed to me with other people. And many of them became my followers almost immediately. It was quite a dramatic unfolding. So Enlightened Next was the organization that developed as a result of all these people gathering around me as I traveled. In Enlightened Next, the philosophy was a mixture or a blend of the traditional Eastern Enlightenment with the Western understanding and scientific discovery of evolution. And it was a very future-oriented, very creative endeavor, embrace, philosophy. You know, it was about trying to realize a utopian dream, utopian aspiration.
When it takes the form of a group with a leader on a mission who may have stated goals that are very grandiose, but whose actual goal is just nothing but self-aggrandizement, that begins to look like a cult.
For a long time, I was convinced that if I felt something strongly at a level of my intuition, I would tend to think that it was what I was feeling was an objective truth. And often it was, especially in the early years. But later on, some of my own feelings were just personal feelings that might have just come from my ego and might not have had anything to do with any kind of objective reality, but might have had to do with personal preferences or fears or desires or other things like that.
At one point, I got the job within the community of choosing the movies that Andrew would watch when he was flying on international teaching trips. I would spend, 10 hours during the week preparing the movies that he should watch, and I would give him trailers and descriptions why I thought he should like it. If I suggested a movie that he didn't like, I'd get in trouble. And I'd have to stop everything I was doing and go to the store and buy hundreds of dollars worth of flowers and spend long periods of time writing letters of apology and gift baskets and buying fruit and talking to my spiritual peers and them helping me sort of find the ways in which my perspective was lacking. I probably did that 6-7 times over a period of 3 years with different movies, just about movies.
It's very hard for me to be objective because I became a spiritual leader when I was 30 years old. So to be in a position to inspire people to a vision that they felt drawn to, that they wanted to actualize, was thrilling. But it's also precarious and dangerous, and I made a lot of mistakes.
When you leave the group, your dissociation breaks. Other people have called it snapping. The person that you were is still there and starts to come back. The person that you made yourself into for the leader is also still lingering, but that person starts to feel like, House of Cards. You start to realize that isn't you.
It was like popcorn. You could just see it. People would get it, and they would just pop, and all of a sudden they were just like, oh my God, I'm out of here. And they'd find out about it, and a day later they'd be telling Andrew that he was not their teacher anymore, and they were leaving, and goodbye. It's got to feel similar to someone coming out of prison, or it was like you were kind of entering the world again for the first time, and everything was amazing.
The group fell apart because I think my authority at a certain point was being questioned. After the crash, I lost all my confidence, and I was quite a mess and a wreck for the better part of 2 years. I began to find my feet about a year ago. And that was because I began to accept responsibility for the fact that I was the one who was at the cause of this terrible calamity.
When I realized it was really, really a cult was when it all broke down. We all started to realize that things were probably at least getting shaken up, that we said, holy shit, we're in a cult. And we've been in a cult this whole time, and it's not the joke that we used to make, like, haha, yeah, we're in a cult, but it's a good cult. Like, this is actually a cult.
I have been spending most of my time traveling around the world, visiting with former students and reaching out to them, especially people who feel they've been hurt, and doing spiritual retreats myself. I'm fully immersed in this process. I don't have any other life.
I don't feel fleeced. I don't really feel conned. I don't feel like I made this, huge judgment error. The experience that I had when I saw Andrew and continue to was really powerful, and it was life-changing. Was I looking for it? No. Do I think I needed to be so involved for all 8 years? Probably not, but at the same time, I don't really know. And at this point, at least I'm trying to, but I think to a reasonable degree, am okay with just not knowing.
Could it have worked? I don't know, I'd like to think. But maybe, but then as soon as you create a group like that, you isolate yourself. And then what good to humanity is that if you isolate yourself? Sometimes I'm nervous to see people, but there is something that we've shared that I don't know how to explain. And it's not that I've got close to other people, but there's something we shared and I don't know how to explain that. I mean, sometimes I just think, why didn't we question things? We're intelligent, And that will always haunt me.